So you're looking to get faster in sim racing and just some general tips and tricks for your racing exploits. Well, we had a chat with Scott Mansell and here's what he had to say. So there is of course more to sim racing than just putting your pedal to the metal and hoping for the best. Just ask professional racing coach Scott Mansell, a former racing driver who's won numerous European championships, driven 25 different F1 cars and worked with brands such as Ferrari and Renault F1. His company, Driver61, helps racing drivers, including sim racers, fulfill their potential through online programs and coaching. We were lucky enough to pick his brains on all things sim racing, ranging from the best sim racing setup, how sim racing compares to real life, and what his top tips are for starting out and getting up to speed. So how does sim racing compare to real life? Well, sim racing is certainly a useful training tool to help bridge the gap to real-world racing, and Scott believes the most transferable skills between the two is a driver's adaptability and knowing how to be fast. You have to feel and predict what's going on the track. What we teach drivers is how to figure out being fast, what to try, and which areas to manipulate, Scott tells Racing Games. So many things are changing throughout a race, like the circuit evolution or the tyres or the weight of the fuel. It's a constantly changing environment, so you need to be adaptable. It's not about knowing the individual tracks for each platform, it's understanding how to adapt yourself to the platform. As a coach and someone who's driven hundreds of different race cars, you develop this skill of being able to know what fast feels like, how to get there quickly, and how to extract the most speed from the car. It's about figuring out how to be faster. It's not about knowing a specific technique. So which game is the most realistic? So Scott told us that the realism of a game's driving experience can depend on the track you're driving on, the car, and the game's physics, of course. According to Scott, there are a number of sims that give a very good experience, but if we're using the sim to train for the real world, then he always suggests Assetto, Corsa, and iRacing. The physics, depending on the cars, are very good, and they're certainly good enough to figure out and work on your technique and adaptability. It's never going to be exactly the same, but these platforms are close enough for you to figure out what is fast, and that can be transferred into anything. Thankfully, you also don't have to spend a fortune on your racing wheel and pedals to get started in sim racing. Scott uses a direct drive wheel and top level pedals, but he also claims that sim racing extraordinaire and GT racer James Baldwin was just as capable racing on a £200 used rig. Scott added that it depends where you're coming from. If you want to be fast in the sim, then you can do it with affordable equipment. You just need to have the right technique and to be fast enough, of course. I don't spend a massive amount of time in the sim, only training for the real world, but I need the better stuff just so I can feel everything. The biggest thing for me is the pedals. I found the most time on a lap when I spent a bit more money on pedals. Nailing your setup and getting all of the hardware working properly is one of Scott's main tips for starting out in the world of sim racing. This includes everything from setting up the field of view, steering wheel, and so on. So let's get into it then. What is the nitty-gritty of track technique, vision, and braking? So vision covers what you are seeing ahead of you and ultimately builds up the habit of looking towards the corner. Scott said that typically our driving vision is low down, very close to the car, not very far in front, and very narrow. In the first week of our training program, we teach drivers how to look in the right area, bring their vision up and look through the corners. The difficulty is it's a very natural thing to bring your vision down when you're pumped up and racing, so it's about building up the habit of looking in the right area. Next is approaching a corner and adopting the right technique for braking and getting the feel of the car. Scott says that once you've adapted your vision, you'll find that the car feels a lot more fluid going through the corner. He added you'll start looking a couple of seconds ahead of yourself, and that means you have a much better picture of what's coming up and you can be much more accurate. The car will be a lot more stable and smoother when it dives on the brakes and rolls into the corner. This then means that you can bring up the speed in the apex of the corner and get the car pushing closer to the limit. What about racecraft? One thing many aspiring sim racers struggle with is wheel-to-wheel racing and learning how to keep calm when battling an opponent for position. Racecraft Preparation is something Scott's Academy prepares sim racers for, and the main thing is learning how to get used to be off the racing line. There are a couple of problems that you need to overcome when you're racing hard with an opponent, Scott said. There's the red mist and the excitement of trying to beat whoever you're racing against, so you need to get used to cars moving around you. You also need to get used to being offline. Whether you're defending and someone is trying to get around the outside of you, or if you're attacking and you're on the inside of an opponent, you have to get used to being in the wrong position on the track. So finally, what about setups? Well, having the best setup for your car to match a specific track is something many sim racers strive for. But Scott believes jumping into the complexities of a setup is nothing if you haven't honed your driving skill and technique first. You still need to have the ability to assess what's going on with your specific car and specific driving technique in those conditions. There's so many variables when you're out on the track, there isn't one perfect setup. Drivers need to understand their technique needs to be good, and then on top of that, you need the capacity to understand where your car is limited and where your driving is limited. Then, once you've got that, you can look for patterns on the whole lap and decide on which setup changes you want to make. That's an important tip for everyone, regardless of the game, to understand. So, in the end, there is no magic bullet or shortcut to being fast, but through some hard work, you can unlock your potential in sim racing. I've been Toby for Racing Games. Let us know your thoughts on this down in the comments below, and we'll catch you in another video here on the channel soon.